and welcome to my emblem Marth guide. In this guide I'm going to be breaking down Marth as an emblem ring and going over how you can use Marth and some features of the emblem. So let's jump into it. So what is the Marth emblem good for? It's definitely a more damage oriented emblem. It has some sustain in the form of unyielding. So essentially you have a suite of offensive tools in this case. So you have Perceptive, which increases your avoid and also scales with high speed. So it allows you to avoid while attacking or initiating. You have Break Defense, which gives you an extra attack if you break. So if you are on a class that has multiple weapon types, you can make use of this. And if you're also using brave weapons and you break, you get an extra brave attack, but it is at half damage. And then you have Unyielding, which is like chip healing if you're low, and the higher your bond level with Marth, the better Unyielding is. It goes all the way up to, if you're below 40%, you get 40% HP back, so it can actually be pretty good for sustaining to some degree. The Divine Speed ability gives you an extra attack as well. So you have two methods of getting extra attacks. Divine Speed only activates when you are engaged. And then you have Lodestar Rush to nuke down a target. So let's demo just like the attack, right? So let's engage. So when I go to attack this enemy with this steel sword, I have an extra attack from the break and an extra attack from Divine Speed. So there's Divine Speed, Perceptive, Break Defense. So I got 3 attacks instead of 2 because somehow I'm not doubling this seemingly. Oh, I see. They have this Sword Breaker that prevents me from following up. If you're wondering why, even though I have 9 speed, I'm not doubling that, it has Sword Breaker for some reason. Alright, so that is the break attack and the Divine Speed attack. Now let's show Lodestar Rush. Lodestar Rush is just like a delete enemy button, and there are ways to combo it. I don't think I have Georgios yet, but if you have Georgios, that can be a pretty good thing to use. Basically, the way it works is you just attack a few times, so you want to use your highest might weapon. So in this case, the Silver Blade boosts my damage up and allows me to one-round this. But Marth is a very simple, straightforward emblem ring that's all about damage and a little bit about sustain, very slightly. The avoid you get is mostly from, player phase. There are enemy phase avoid abilities, passives you can get from Marth, but those need unlocked. Alright, so let's jump into the stat increases. So the stat increases you get from using Marth are Strength, Dex, and Speed. This will help any physical bruiser as it gives you more Dex for accuracy and a little bit of crit. The Speed always helps for doubling, and the Strength always helps for increasing base damage. These are the stat increases at bond level 10. So plus 2 Strength, plus 3 Dex, plus 2 Speed. They are capped out at 19 bond, so if you get 19 or 20 bond, you will get plus 3 strength, plus 4 dex, and plus 4 speed. This emblem, late game, is specifically good with Chimera if you're doing a Brave Lance Sandstorm build, because what this allows you to do is it increases her dex for triggering Sandstorm, it increases her speed, which allows her to double more consistently, it increases her base damage when she doesn't trigger Sandstorm, and when you're engaged, you get Divine Speed, which gives you an additional 2 hits from the Brave. So Divine Speed can be very useful in a specific build. Compared to other endgame emblem rings, Marth isn't really the best, but he does give good stats, and he's a pretty solid overall emblem ring. Another thing to mention is the availability of Marth. So you get him early on, and you lose him on Chapter 10, and you don't get him back until Chapter 22 post-game. So it's pretty rough. So Chapter 23 is when you have him, the beginning of Chapter 23. So through most of the middle game and half of the end game, you just don't have him. So something to mention. Let's talk about Marth's Paralog difficulty. So should you do Marth's Paralog? I think you should. It's pretty easy, honestly. You basically get to control when you fight him. So you can route the entire left side of the map and kill the thieves. And then when you're ready, you can attack the center. So it's not that bad. I'm fairly certain you actually have to break the door down in order to aggro, and as long as you don't attack any of these, you'll be fine. And you can easily bottleneck these with like a Lucina Bond Shield or with fire. There are 2 wyverns that respawn here that will attack you, but they're not that difficult to deal with, especially if you have archers. So you can just set up your archers so that as they get close, you just shoot them down. Now there are some enemies to watch out for, like this Thoron dude. He has pretty high magic attack, so just be aware of that. He also has Bologna, Bulganon, and he has 2 health bars, so just be on the watch out. This has 2 health bars. This has 2 health bars. This does as well. There's a few enemies. This does as well. There's a few enemies that have 2 health bars that you probably wouldn't notice. This one has 3, and he has a Brave Sword, so just be mindful of that if you're using Bonded Shield, because Brave Sword can hit through it. But overall, I do recommend doing this if you plan on using Marth to get the Bond level 20. Let's talk about good units for the Emblem Ring. Now this is considering more so late game than early game. Early game, you can put Marth on whoever you want. There's not really that many units to put him on. Mostly just like a Lear or Chloe is fine, maybe Louis or another unit if you want to run someone else. But for late game, a Lear is a good option. So he increases strength, dex, and speed, which is like just increasing strength and speed in of itself is very useful and is going to help you out immensely. This also allows you to double more consistently, to hit for more damage, especially, so if you're doubling and you're +3 strength, you're hitting for, 6 more damage. So him allowing you to double is huge. So Alir, Chloe, Anna not so much unless you're running physical on her, which is weird. The dex and the speed is nice on her, but the strength increase is kind of like a waste. So it's just not going to someone useful. Marin would be a good option. Saline if you're using physical, but she usually uses magical weapons. Hanette would be a decent option. She tends to have lower speed, so her breaking allows her to get extra attacks in, and her being popped allows her to get extra 50% attacks in with divine speed. Chimera is a great option. This is probably one of the better options. She's really good on Sigurd or Marth if you're running a Brave Lance build, specifically because the dex trigger allows her to get Sandstorm, so if you increase her dex, that increases her Sandstorm trigger rate, and increasing her speed also allows her to double more consistently. So it's probably one of the better emblem rings for her if you build her correctly. Now this Chimera, I would argue, is not built correctly. She has Lance power, which, that I think she should have speed. That's kind of the mistake I made in this run. Hortensia, no. Alchrist would be good at this. He's not going to be breaking things because bows can't break anything, but the divine speed wouldn't be bad. It would allow him to get extra hits in and go for Luna triggers, and it also, he gets the dex, the speed increase, and the strength increase, so you have better base damage. So Luna, unlike Sandstorm calculates based off of defense. Luna calculates based off of your actual strength or magic, and it scales with, just penetrates more armor, right? So increasing his strength and increasing the rate at which he triggers Luna will increase his overall damage, whereas with Chimera, when she just doesn't Sandstorm, you'll still increase her overall damage, but it won't specifically increase the Sandstorm damage. It'll just increase the rate at which it comes out. Veil, I wouldn't do. Doesn't make sense. Mavier could be a decent user if you just want him to, get some extra hits in. He's not the fastest unit, so he's not going to be doubling. If you want him to double, you could at least get him the divine speed. It will increase some of his stats. He might be a better Flame Lancer than a physical unit, so it's probably not the best for him. Saphir would be a decent user of this. She could break lances and get the extra hits in. She could also go for divine speed. It also helps her dex a bit. She has accuracy problems, so increasing her hit by a little bit helps. The damage and the speed is nice. She's probably not going to be doubling, though. Yunaka would be a fantastic user of Marth. The breaking isn't there, but the divine speed, increasing strength, dex, and speed on anyone physical is going to help them. This would definitely help Risotto. Getting Risotto's speed up, that's one of the issues he has. Would be good on Kagetsu. It would be okay on Bune. Diamante would be okay on. Jade would be okay on. Zelkov would be good on. Louis, Amber, Alfred, pretty much any physical unit. Etier if you over-invested in her. Lapis, and Jean, depending on the build. So pretty much most units can make use of Marth. Pretty much any physical unit can make use of Marth. But specifically the ones, I would say the best users for endgame are Chimera and Alchrist. So that they can go for Brave, Luna, and Sandstorm triggers specifically. Saline, potentially, because she does have Ignis, but her dex isn't as high as either of these. So she tends to not be as consistent. But she could be a contender. Similar to Ivy, but she doesn't use magic. Or, I'm sorry, she doesn't use physical, so it'd be kind of a waste in the strength aspect. So what are some good classes for the emblem? So this is generally going to be physical classes, anything that wants speed. So pretty much anything that isn't a magical class or a tank, I would say, would be good. Because whatever you're running, as long as it can go for doubling, it's worth it. So like General is a bad class, for example. Great Knight isn't horrible. Some units can actually double on Great Knight, but it does reduce your speed by quite a bit. But General is a bad option. Any magical classes are a bad option. I would also argue that things like Chi Adept are a bad option, just because of the fact that they need strength and magic before their damage starts scaling. And you're probably better off running Erica or a different emblem ring for more utility. Thief would make use of this. So Thief is a good physical, pretty much any physical class. So what type bonuses does Marth give? This is something that sometimes you can change who you put emblem rings on based on this, but generally it doesn't matter too much. So in the case of backups, you do get +1 attack. So instead of hitting 7 times, you hit 8 times, which is alright. It's not the best thing, but it also is good on Chimera. So this would be the unit that's probably going to be using this, maybe a hero. You could run Marth on Goldberry, and that would also be a pretty solid option. But aside from that, the backup one isn't too crazy. So let me find a mystical now for you. Alright, so here's Veil. So there's a type bonus for mystical. It's not really that good, to be honest. It's not even like a type bonus. So instead of you dealing damage based on strength, you deal damage based on magic. This is more of like, this isn't a bonus. This is like, you now deal damage with this ability, more so than this is an advantage. So definitely not worth it to run on mystical. And then the other thing, there's coverts. So let's find a covert. Nice covert for you. Type bonus on divine speed. Now this one's about to blow your mind. If extra attack hits, it poisons foe. That's kind of a joke. Like, honestly, I don't even think this is a bonus. I think this is just like how it should function. So like this is another example of it just not being a bonus. It's just like, yeah, you'd expect that. All right, and then for the other type bonuses, we have Dragon. So on divine speed, Dragon gets so the additional attack heals the user by damage done. So this allows you to kind of enemy phase tank or to tank in general, which is kind of nice because you always perform the extra attack, right? Even during enemy phase. So healing for the damage dealt can sustain you. So this does allow a divine dragon or a dragon type to enemy phase a little bit and to heal. Now Veil is not going to be doing that on her personal class, really, because she's very frail, so you'd have to set up something so that she wouldn't die, but Alir could arguably make use of this on Divine Dragon, and it would be okay. Potentially decent with some other abilities for sustain. The other thing you get for being a dragon type is Lodestar Rush, getting 2 more hits. So that's pretty much it for bonuses. The best one for the, like, when you're actually using this, the best one is probably the backup one, because you're probably going to be throwing this on Goldmary to increase her strength, speed, and dex, Alchrist to do a similar thing, but he's a covert, or Chimera, who's also a backup. So you have 2 backups and a covert. Now the covert, interestingly enough, bows don't poison, so the additional attack poisoning on a bow is kind of interesting, but I don't consider poison to be that useful in general, especially with how crazy the endgame is. But you shouldn't base your decision on Marth use around the type bonuses. It's not going to be that game-breaking. So what are some good passives to unlock and why? So Sword Agility is good for increasing Avoid. If you want to go for Avoid stacking, it's cheaper than Avoid plus 20 or Avoid plus whatever. So just Avoid plus in general. Avoid plus is good for stacking Avoid, for going for Avoid tank builds, for putting on utility units. Unyielding can be decent if you want to be able to heal yourself when you're low. It's pretty cheap to get. Like, getting Unyielding plus plus is very cheap. So if you want to constantly be healing for free, it does cost a skill slot, so it's debatable as to how good it is. And Perceptive is really good for initiating. So if you get to Perceptive Plus, which is only 250 SP, you get avoid plus 30, and the way that the scaling works with high speed is you get +1 avoid per 4 speed. So every 4 points of speed you have, you get +1 extra avoid when attacking with Perceptive. Most of this is avoid based. Break defenses is decent if you have a unit who is consistently breaking things. It can also be decent on punching units because they can consistently break bows, daggers, and tomes. So this is a decent option for those units. Let's talk about Marth's Engraving. So Marth's Engraving is one of the engravings where there's no downside to using it at all. So in other words, it is pure upside. So you get +1 damage, +10 hit and crit, and then +5 avoid and dodge. So putting this on any weapon you plan on running throughout an entire run is a good idea. Generally, I put this on a Lear's weapon, and you can switch it late game if you want. But you're not going to have too many good early units that can take advantage of this. And Chloe generally wants Holy for the weight reduction. It's very similar. It increases damage, reduces weight, and increases avoid. So this is better on Chloe, this is better on a Lear. So generally I put this on a Lear's weapon. This is my first playthrough for Maddening. I put it on Liberation. I don't recommend this. You're better off putting it on a steel sword and then upgrading it to a silver sword, or just upgrading a steel sword to +5. Alternatively, if you have the hero weapon, it's really good on this. Arguably, there's better things for this, though, because the weight is so low, you can get away with putting Leaf's Engraving on this, but that's a good option as well. Generally, you use it for the damage and the hit increase, and whoever wants it can get it, so it's pretty straightforward, pretty good engraving. To wrap up, let's talk about Marth's weapons. So he has the Rapier, which is the first weapon you have access to at low bond levels. This is a decent damage, a decent might sword that is effective against horses, so any cavalry and armor. Early game, this is really good. Late game, you're going to have better things. You can't augment it. I don't augment anything. I don't do relay trials at all. I find them to be a waste of time. But if you want to improve this thing's damage, you can. It also looks pretty sick. Then you also have Mercurius. A lot of people take advantage of this for the double XP you gain while using this to power level things early game. Personally, I don't optimize around Mercurius. You can. It generally just makes maps take longer, or you have to change your tactics. But you can do it, and it's nice to get double XP. You also have the Falchion, which is effective against Dagrons. So killing dragons is pretty useful, and being able to have a dragon effective weapon on Marth is pretty nice. So you have armor and cav effective, double XP, and dragon effective. So that's pretty much it for the Marth guide, the Marth Emblem Ring guide. Definitely like and subscribe if you enjoyed this or found this useful. Feel free to drop a comment if you feel like I missed anything, and I'll see you in the next one.